So some jokes can be rather expensive. Indeed, the joke that I'm about to tell you cost over $2 million. The project in this case is called Solar Roadways. This is their goal.
It's technology that replaces all roadways, parking lots, sidewalks, driveways, tarmacs, bike paths, and outdoor recreation surfaces with solar panels. And not just lifeless, boring solar panels, smart, microprocessing, interlocking, hexagonal solar units.
And it's raised over $2 million. So they got this webpage up that's going to answer folks like myself. You know, sorts with over a decade of glass blowing experience and designing high-performance glass apparatus and so on. The page starts with an unintentionally ironic statement that there's a lot of false information about solar roadways on the internet these days. Yes, there is, and if you stopped pumping it out, there wouldn't be as much of it. But hey, no, I know, that's not fair. That's just a claim, and claims are cheap. If you want to convince the open-minded, then you're going to have to demonstrate it. So let's examine this claim that they make on their website. False claim, you can't see LEDs in the daylight. And they come out with 2 examples of where you can see LEDs in the daytime. That's traffic lights and LED billboards. Well, amazingly enough, the one example that they didn't come up with of where you can see LEDs in the daytime was
solar freaking roadways.
Seriously, you make the point that you've already built these solar roadways, that they're not speculation. Specifically, you say, in response to Thunderfoot compares our solar road panels to a thorium-powered car and a transorbital pogo stick and says, if you could make one, it would be super cool. And then you say, we actually have made 108 of them. And he's right, they are super cool. Well, why not just show us them working during the day? As Walter von Braun said, and as I've repeatedly done, a single good test result is worth 1,000 expert opinions. But instead, again and again, we only ever see the LEDs working in the dark. Now I wonder why that might be. So I decided I would make my own solar roadway using LEDs that look very similar to theirs. And this is the result.
So in reality, this is actually about as sophisticated as the Solar Roads project. All they've done is got some solar panels, some LEDs, which as you can see in full daylight, really aren't so good.
But they do have 2 examples of light-emitting diodes being visible during the day. Firstly, traffic lights, and you're quite right, they are visible during the day, as long as you put a shade on them to keep the direct sunlight off them. To keep the direct sunlight off them. I think I see where they're going here. That if they put a sunshade up to, say, keep the sunlight off the solar roadways, then you'll be able to see the LEDs. Ah, such genius. Seriously, with ideas of that caliber, I'm surprised they've only raised $2 million. Or their second example, LED billboards. Yeah, those wonderfully environmentally friendly power whore LED billboards. Well, firstly, look, LEDs really aren't that good if you're looking at them at a very shallow angle, which is curiously exactly the angle you'll be looking at them if they're between 2 glass plates in the road.
So then we thought, why not put some LEDs to illuminate the lines? This would be like driving in a video game or on a runway.
It's almost impossible to think of a worse place to use LEDs. And this probably also explains why in none of our Resident Geniuses footage do we see the LEDs from the angle you would see them in a car. No, instead you're always looking at the road from above. Now sure, that's great if you're a bird, but if you're in a car, not so much. However, it turns out that's just the beginning of the problems. The big kahuna here is what's known in the trade as conservation of energy. Look, our roadways already have solar-powered lighting of one sort or another. I'll let this guy explain.
So this is just to give you a rough order of magnitude feel for how much light you can actually really get out of a solar roadway. And this piece of paper here, I'm just going to use as a unit area. And the reason it's good is because when that piece of paper is in the full sunlight, that's basically that's putting out as much diffuse light really as you can get out of all of that solar energy. So all that solar energy is basically hitting this and being reflected as diffuse light. Very little of it is actually transferred to heat in the white paper, and basically everything else is turned into light. Now the reason that's great is that means that this is the absolute most amount of light that you can get out of light falling on this sort of area. So if you wanted to get this out of a solar panel, what you've got to do is you've got to cover that with solar panels, you've got to transform that into electricity and then transfer that back into LED light, and each time along the way you're going to lose some energy. Now it turns out that even good solar panels are only about 20% efficient, so that if I coated all of this with solar panels, 20% is going to be about there something, right? If I were to coat all of this with solar panels, I automatically lose that much energy, which means that that's now the most amount of light energy that I can get out of this. And then if I want to power these both day and night, of course that means that I only get solar energy during the day, so that now means that I lose all of this. And of course that's only the amount of light reflection I can get, the light generation I can get, if it's pointing directly at the sun the whole time. Now, when the solar panels are laid down like this, you lose probably 2/3 of your energy compared to if they're tracking the sun, but we're just going to say half. So now we're going to lose all of that. And then you've got to convert that electricity into light again, and LEDs, they vary in the efficiency, but let's say 50% efficiency. So realistically, if you want to coat something of this sort of size with solar panels, that is the sort of area of brightness that you could light up 24 hours a day. And just to put that into perspective, let's turn our LEDs on. There we go. So as you can see, our LEDs really don't do that much for us. So I mean, this is the primary reason why the solar roadways is just a non-starter. It could barely light enough of the road to actually produce the center marking, let alone to actually power the whole nation. And at this point, you've just got to be honest that compared to coating this area with solar panels and all the losses from the solar panel, from only having power when the sun's up and so forth, you're better off just painting a white line down the middle of the road. It doesn't have any real cost in terms of infrastructure, and it's very efficient for producing a white line during the day. We are essentially using solar powered lighting here.
Or looked at another way, the average square meter of the Earth's surface receives about 340 watts per square meter. Now, your typical billboard, in order to be visible during the day, they run at somewhere between 350 and 1,000 watts per square meter. That is, to run these things such that they're visible during the day, then they've got to put out more energy than is actually falling on them from the sunlight. Otherwise, they would just appear washed out. And of course, remember our earlier calculation, where we get a good feel for how much area we can light up with an equivalent photon density to sunlight from a unit-sized solar panel. But the bit where it goes completely crazy is when you calculate the energy bill for if they fulfill their dreams of having the roads lit up like a computer game.
So then we thought, why not put some LEDs to illuminate the lines? This would be like driving in a video game or on a runway.
I mean, we know how much area they want to light.
There's 25,000 square miles of road surfaces, parking lots, and driveways in the lower 48 states. If we covered that with solar panels, just a 15% efficiency, we produce 3 times more electricity than this country uses on an annual basis.
We know the rough energy consumption per square meter, which means we can calculate how much energy they would use per year and how much that would cost using cheap electricity. Just the electricity bill alone would be about $20 trillion per year. That's the bargain price of $65,000 for every man, woman, and child in America per year.
This is exactly the kind of over-the-horizon thinking that has brought Idaho's own solar roadways to national and world prominence.
You would be looking at increasing the electricity consumption of your average American by a factor of about 100. Or looked at another way, if you were to only light 1/100th of the road area like this, and that would just about give you enough power to light a little white stripe down the middle of the road. You know, the sort of thing that we traditionally get out of painting a white line down the middle of the road. That in the Solar Roads project would still double the average power consumption of your typical American. Or alternatively, we could skip the glass surface, we could skip the microprocessors, we could skip the LEDs and the solar panels and just paint a white line on the asphalt. I mean, it's quite amazing that anyone ever thought these people were visionary in any way, shape or form, let alone visionary enough to give them over $2 million to pursue something which you can show to be bunk with a few back-of-the-envelope calculations. Where their technical expertise here was about that of plugging in some LEDs on top of a solar panel under a sheet of glass. But if you think that's depressingly stupid, they're just getting warmed up, like the idea of warming the tiles to melt snow. He says, false claim, we cannot afford to heat roads. And then he quotes from the Federal Highway Administration, over 70% of the nation's roads are located in snowy regions which receive more than 5 inches of average snowfall annually. Each year, 24% of the weather-related vehicle crashes occur on snowy, slushy or icy pavements, yada yada yada. Winter road maintenance accounts for roughly 20% of the Department of Transport maintenance budgets. State and local agencies spend more than $2.3 billion on snow and ice control operations annually. To which our resident genius says, does the current system of snow removal sound cheap to anyone? What would saving over 1,300 lives and preventing over 115,000 injuries per year be worth? Not to mention medical bills, vehicle repairs, lost wages, etc. What? That's it? That's your entire argument? Does the current system of snow removal sound cheap to anyone? That's it? Your entire argument? Well, allow me to retort. Look, it's not exactly rocket science to understand that if it was cheaper to melt snow rather than just to move it to the side of the road, then we would use flamethrowers for snow removal, not snowplows. And the reason we don't do that is because it is much cheaper just to move the snow to the side of the road. Look, it's not even a matter of a discussion, it's simple thermodynamics. You know, that conservation of energy stuff we were going over earlier. If you want to turn 1 kilogram of ice at freezing point into 1 kilo of water at freezing point, it requires about 300 kilojoules per kilogram. And according to the Department of Transport stats, the typical place in America gets, say, 13 centimeters of snow, which is the equivalent of about 1.3 centimeters of ice. We know the target road area, and therefore we can calculate how much ice there is to melt. And therefore, we know how much power is needed to melt that ice. Therefore, we can calculate the electricity bill using cheap electricity. Oh yeah, you're right. $2 billion really doesn't sound very cheap. I've got a great idea for saving money. Let's replace it with a system that, if it was 100% efficient, would cost $5 billion per year. And that's ignoring the fact that these solar panels will be in the northern part of America, where there isn't much sunlight. In the winter, where there's even less sunlight, and they're going to be covered in snow, which means they're not going to generate any bloody power to melt the snow. Their website isn't done with making stupid or demonstrably wrong claims by a long way. They go on. False claim, glass is softer than asphalt. Not even close, they claim. Really? Is that so? So if I rub, say, asphalt against glass, then we should end up with scratched asphalt, right? Well, let's put that to the test, shall we? Here I've got a piece of blacktop and some borosilicate glass, a fairly hard glass. And let's see which one is harder by rubbing the two against each other.
So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rub one against the other, and almost immediately you will see that this is an absolute no-brainer. That this would just, the asphalt composite versus glass, you're just going to end up with ground glass in very short order. So now it's true that some of the asphalt or this composite might have actually got scratched up too, but to be honest, that doesn't really matter because you don't need your asphalt to be optically clear.
Oh dear, I think I just demonstrated that you're talking crap. But we can come back to that shortly. In the meantime, you go on to claim, so if anyone tries to tell you that glass is soft, just remind them that even simple glass is harder than steel. By comparison, it's asphalt that is soft. Well, on the steel, the answer is yes. Yes, the steel is soft.
So as for steel being softer than glass, well, duh. So this is just regular borosilicate slate glass, nothing special about it. And straight away you can see that, zoom in a little there. So there you go, that's glass versus steel. Yep, that's quite right that glass will scratch steel. This is of course much more ductile and such, like this won't shatter. This will.
Yes, you can scratch steel with glass. And frankly, I think you're probably confusing steel's hardness with other properties, like say for instance its tensile strength. You see, steel is very good in tension, which makes it very good for making things like cables out of. But steel is nonetheless soft. Or if you want to keep playing the moron games, if glass is really harder than steel, why don't we make the cables on the Golden Gate Bridge out of them? Or for that matter, why don't we just make them out of solar tiles? But let's come back to that. By comparison, it's asphalt that's soft, because that demonstrates you're utterly clueless about the materials used to construct roads. And that's the charitable interpretation. The term asphalt can be used to refer to either the black goo, the sort of bitumen, that is used to hold roads together, or the composite material that includes ground up rocks and this black goo, and it's called things like tarmac or asphalted concrete and so on. Well, if they're using the term asphalt here to refer to just the black goo, and then they're comparing that to glass for hardness, then they're just idiots, because no one uses that black goo as the sole road surface.
So what you've got here is basically a piece of blacktop, which is a sort of composite of rocks in asphalt, or sometimes this is actually just called asphalt itself. So what you've got here is basically that black goop on its own. As you see, it's actually pretty soft. You can certainly deform it with your finger, your fingernail, your knife on it, of course. Stuff's really quite soft. And you'd know this, when you actually get a really hot day, this stuff does become softer. But what makes this a really nice road material is the ground up rocks here that actually provide the very hard surface for the road, and the black goop here, the bitumen, the asphalt, basically is just a binder that holds it together, keeps it all waterproof. Okay, so what I got here is fresh off the pavement, this piece of sort of asphalt aggregate. So what you'll find here, this thing's actually quite warm, is there's quite a lot of plasticity in the actual binder. If I can find a piece that's actually... it's actually rubbery. There you go. So you see that it sort of will come apart, stick back together again. And that's sort of part of what makes it good for a composite material. Is there are sort of softish bits in it that are more flexible, and then the bit that actually takes all of the load are these little rocks.
However, if they're comparing asphalt as it's used to make roads from to glass, then they're just demonstrably talking bull, in that it's 100% demonstrable, or 100% of the time, that asphalt is much harder than glass.
The asphalt composite versus glass, you're just going to end up with ground glass in very short order.
So yeah, maybe the asphalt here does get scratched up by wear, but that's not a problem because road surfaces don't need to be optically transparent as they would if you were trying to make a solar roadway. They continue. One more thing, when you temper glass, it becomes 4 to 5 times stronger than non-tempered glass listed in Moore's hardness scale. It doesn't make it harder, just stronger. Oh, bravo! And congratulations on working out that tempering glass doesn't make it any harder. That is, it doesn't make it any more resistant to scratches. It just makes it more resistant to shattering. But it also does mean that when it does shatter, it does so fairly impressively like this.
How? Because side windows are made of tempered glass. This makes it very hard and very resistant to blunt objects. But when you fracture porcelain, it creates a very, very fine, very hard point.
Solar roadways will be made out of tempered glass.
How? Because side windows are made of tempered glass.
So congratulations, this is exactly the same material that you're proposing to make glass roads out of, and one little fragment of alumina could do millions of dollars worth of damage. Which curiously actually made me click on the side tab about the military applications they have for solar roadways. Because what every military dreams of is an integrated transport, power and communication system that can be crippled by one guy throwing a handful of ceramic out of his car window every half mile or so. But it turns out the military applications are so stupid, they really don't even require debunking. Seriously. Military applications. Imagine being able to put eyes and ears on the ground anywhere in the world without putting human lives in danger. Drop a solar road panel into the hills of Afghanistan by parachute. The parachute detaches upon impact and is retracted beneath the panel. Camera modules this is a roadway, for God's sake. Camera modules open up and aim in every direction. Satellite dish configures itself for the communications to anywhere in the world. Oh my God. And people gave these Muppets $2 million of moron money. Yeah, I can imagine the military sitting there now in their briefing. You know, what we want is a military surveillance device that we can parachute into enemy territory, sort of like the Mars lander.
A child with a stick of chewing gum has just rendered your $100 million worth of hardware useless. Any suggestions?
But then we want to put a glass surface on it that can be used as a roadway for 20 years. And then we want to put some changeable LEDs on it, just in case someone wants to play basketball on it. And then, of course, having ignored all these minor technical challenges about their ideas, you know, trivial details like the conservation of energy and that glass is fundamentally unsuitable for making roads of, that sort of thing, they then come up with this doozy. We wonder about people who reflexively dismiss our concept without trying to understand it, or go on public forums and attack us. It helps us to remember that there have always been people against change. For some, it's just too scary. They want to just keep things the same. Perhaps they are the descendants of those who argued that the earth was flat, that we didn't need cars because horses worked just fine, told the Wright brothers that they were out of their minds, or insisted that we would never reach the moon. Or perhaps they are the voices of larger entities who now feel threatened by the paradigm shift that is solar roadways. But you're just not being visionary enough. You've missed the most obvious place to put solar panels on the surface of the sun. One solar panel on the surface of the sun will generate well over 1 million times the energy of one here on Earth, which would mean you'd only need about 1,000 solar road panels on the sun, and that would give you the same power as covering the entire road surface in America with them.
See, we produce 3 times more electricity than this country uses on an annual basis.
I mean, just think of the savings there. You could have limitless free power. Now, sure, there will be those who reflexively dismiss this argument without trying to understand it. Perhaps they are the descendants of those who argued that the earth was flat, that we didn't need cars because horses worked just fine, that told the Wright brothers that they were out of their minds or insisted that we would never reach the moon. Or perhaps they're the voices of larger entities that now feel threatened by the paradigm shift of putting solar roadways in the most obvious place ever, on the surface of the sun. Nah. The reason that I find solar roadways fundamentally distasteful is that they've duped people into giving them over $2 million for a project that you can demonstrate is fundamentally unviable with a $10 coffee pot and a damaged piece of blacktop. That is, the material that they want to use is fundamentally unsuitable for its proposed purpose. Proposing glass roads really is as stupid as proposing chocolate frying pans. That is, you're not being the Wright brothers by proposing solar-powered roads or chocolate frying pans. You are being Bozo the Clown. The really sad thing is, though, that enough people were duped here to give them $2 million for this. I mean, you've really just got to laugh or cry at a joke that is that expensive.